Hey everyone, happy first Friday of August 2019. Happy Fridays with Fidelman. I'm Cheryl Fidelman, performance artist and life coach. And today's topic on Fridays with Fidelman is depression and attunement, a new way of being depressed. So this topic came to me on Sunday, this past Sunday. I woke up, I was feeling really groggy. My body was feeling really heavy, and I kind of ignored it, and I planned to just do what I was going to do that day, which was go to the gym and return some clothes, and I think those were the extent of my plans for that day. And I went to the gym, and I couldn't move my body. It was like I gained like 400 pounds. It was like I was in this heavy body that I didn't have the facility to operate. So I was like, I'm leaving the gym. So I left the gym. I got in the car, and I just drove around, just like in this daze. And I was like, finally, I kind of came to, and I was like, I'm just going to go home. So I went home, and I laid in bed, and I just sort of like gave into it. I just sort of fell into it. And it took me, a little while it took me a little while to realize, like, oh, I'm depressed. This is depression. I hadn't experienced like a depressive episode in a long time, and I think I thought on some level I was immune. Like I'm healed enough, or I figure something out that I'm no longer going to be depressed, and I was wrong. I was completely taken out on Sunday, and and I kept thinking, how did this happen? And what did I eat something wrong? Did I do something different? Did I not get enough sleep? I had a little bit of tequila the night before, but I like tequila. I have tequila once in a while, and I never had this kind of reaction from it. And I was just thinking, why, how? And then I noticed that is me going into having a cognitive reaction to the way that I was feeling. And I thought, let me set all the trying to figure it out and all those thoughts aside and not try to figure this out and just be in it and just feel it. And if it didn't feel good, my body was really heavy. I was a little bit dizzy. My head was so full. I felt really kind of indifferent, even to my cat, my cat follows me everywhere. If I'm in bed, my cat is immediately in bed with me. And even with my cat, I just didn't care about her. She was just some like foreign creature. And so I really just sat with the feelings and the sensations and set my entire cognitive world aside, which is this new way of being depressed that I'm suggesting. And I want to be clear that I'm not a mental health professional. I'm a life coach. I'm a certified life coach, but I'm not somebody that, treats depression or really anything that's diagnosable or listed in the DSM. But with my attunement practice, which is feeling without thinking, we're leaning into the sensations rather than going to our brain to try to handle the situation. So in the past, I would go into this field of depression. My cognitive reaction would be like, I'm worthless. I'm a piece of shit. Life is going nowhere. I'm just inferior. Like all of these really negative thoughts, I would spiral down in response to the depression. And it occurred as like part of the depression. But what I'm seeing in my attunement practice is that it's a reaction. We can look at it as a reaction to the physical sensations in our body. So on Sunday, I sank into the physical sensations, every cognitive reaction, every thought that I had of trying to figure it out, or sad negative thoughts, I just set them aside and I just sort of like sat and swam in the feeling. And so I fell asleep for about 3 hours. And then I woke up and I thought, well, let me at least get some work done. Let me get on my computer and I can be depressed and get some work done. Well, I got on my computer and I had zero interest. Nothing. I had zero interest in the computer, my emails, the internet. They were just this like foreign situation to me that I felt zero desire to be involved with. Which in my normal life, I'm extremely passionate about my work. And on Sunday, I was completely disengaged. So I put my computer down and I said, okay, I'm just going to go back to bed. I'm just going to feel this thing. I'm just going to keep feeling it. I'm just going to keep feeling it and feeling it and feeling it till there's no more to feel. And so I laid in bed, and then the next day it was kind of over. I mean, I felt a bit hungover from it, like a bit groggy, like emotionally just sort of off for a few days, but I wasn't in the depths of it anymore. And so another thing that I want to point out or share about my experience with depression. When I was, I don't remember, like late teens or something, I was seeing a therapist, and she said that I had depressive dysthymia. Sorry, there's an airplane. She said I had depressive dysthymia, which is like a base level, like just like a consistent, low-level, depressive way of experiencing life. And I was like, no, I don't have that. That's not, no. Because my mom was manic depressive. And the word depression was equivalent to my mom. And I was like, I'm not my mom. I am not my mom. I'm not my mom. Depression, mom, not me. I don't belong in that equation. So I ignored my depression for probably 15 years or something like that. And I just lived with it. And I lived with this baseline sort of dysregulation kind of sadness and disassociation. And this like baseline of like a repressed, like a depressed energy. And tried to figure it out for a long time, and just sort of thought, well, that's just me. This is just me. This is my particular disposition. And I would get wiped out. I mean, you know, I had the baseline, the dysthymia, and then fairly often I'd get wiped out for days or weeks at a time, like I did this past Sunday. Thankfully, that lasted a day. But in the past, yeah, I'd get totally wiped out. And I just thought, that's life. That's my life. This is how life is. Till I really started to really dig deep. I mean, I was in therapy for a long time, but there was a major turning point in my healing where I really like just kept digging and digging deep until I noticed how I probably on some level inherited this depression. On some level, it's a trauma response to abuse in my home. This habit that I had of disengaging, because it was sort of a safer to sort of disengage from what was happening in my household than to actually fully engage and be with it. So there was a lot of reasons and things that influenced my depression. And also, I tend to think that this dysthymia, this subtle, consistent depression, is just a response to being human, right? For some of us, at least for me, it's like this response to being human. It's like a consistent response to the unanswered questions of being alive. Like, what are we doing here? Well, what is this? What's going on? Why you? Why me? What direction do I go in? This sort of like, even particularly before I really sat and focused and lived my mission and purpose in life, I was just like, what is happening? Where am I headed? I don't know how to direct this ship. And so, yeah, it's just this like consistent subtle existential crisis that was just always, simmering for me. And even though I thankfully and gratefully no longer have that simmer, but I've made a life and a living out of just constantly asking those unanswerable questions that used to like anchor me in this malaise. Now I've made a living out of consistently digging up existential inquiries, and I really enjoy that thoroughly. And I'd be interested to know, and I throw this question out there, and instant message me with the answer or put it in the comments. Private message me if it's private, but I'd be interested to know is there anything in your life, ways that you operate, or decisions that you've made, or habits that you have that you feel like you've gotten from your family, your parents, your guardians, but you haven't quite wanted to admit it. You haven't quite wanted to admit it that this is the thing that you got from your parent. Even if the way you have it or express it or deal with it is different or less than the way they did. But is there anything there from you that you're like, you're experiencing it, but you're denying it because you don't, if you admit it, it would mean that you are like that parent, like my mother who was really manic and the depression completely took over her life and I witnessed it every single day. And so when it came to depression, I just didn't want to admit that it was anything that I experienced any even morsel of it because I didn't want to think that I was anything like my mother. And that was like a 15-year denial. So I'm putting it out there as is a new way of experiencing depression, if you will. And, certainly if the depression persists and it's taking your life in the sense that you can't go out and operate in the world, that's a bit of a different story than what I'm addressing. But if they are depressive bouts or depressive episodes that pull you out for a day or two, several days, a new way of experiencing it is to simply become an organism that just feels and doesn't think. Because when you have a cognitive response to a feeling, it makes the feeling worse. Like my cognitive responses of trying to figure out how did this happen? Why is this happening? I'm a loser, I'm going down the drain, like all of those thoughts would make the depression worse and the feeling worse, and it would exacerbate what I was already feeling. So, so this is, a byproduct of my attunement practice, also known as feeling without thinking. So I hope I gave you some golden nuggets there for those of you that experience depression. And I'm putting out my new summit. It's done, actually. Well, it's almost done. We're putting it out next week. And it's called the Trust Yourself Again Summit, Heal Your Trauma and Be the Real You in Sex, Family, and Money. And have an awesome, awesome weekend, everybody. Happy healing. Bye. Just a little thought tag about another reason to set aside these thoughts that are a reaction to our somatic, physical, sensational experience is because those thoughts can carry over for weeks. You have a whole bunch of depressive, negative thoughts, and they will shade the way that you move through life for weeks, even if the depressive feeling isn't there. But to come out of the hole of all of that convincing, because they're really convincing thoughts. My depressive thoughts were really convincing. Like, I'm shit, like there is no future, that everything I'm striving for is actually just not going to happen. And so on. Just a lot of really shitty, negative, self-deprecating, like self-abusive thoughts. And the hole that those thoughts would dig for me, I was climbing out of that hole for weeks. So we're not just healing from the physical feeling of depression, but we're sort of returning from the black hole that we cognitively designed in the depressive moment. So just throwing that out there, so that the echo effect, the domino effect of negative depressive thoughts. Okay, thanks, guys.